so that we approach you about things. And then when you need us, we'll know who you are. So it's good to know recruiters. And what we really like is when you say, well, look, I'm very happy. I've only been here, 5 years or whatever. I'm very happy. But you might call Susie or George. They would both be good and why. Be a source for us. That's what that's called. You're being a source. You're giving us ideas of, well, I'm not interested, but here's some people who may be. That is fabulous because we really appreciate that. And promote yourself and others. So see what I just said was, even if you're not interested, promote Susie and George. Be one of those people who, a rising tide lifts all boats. If you help others, they will reciprocate. It may not be immediate, but if you help others, what goes around comes around. That is really, really true. And this is all about expanding your network. I have so many networks. I know so many people. People will ask me, well, do you know Debbie Chin? Not yet, but I know I'm going to meet her. It's a matter of time. And the thing about, you've heard about degrees of separation. I'm down to 2. Let me give you an example. So I was in London at a partner meeting. I've been with the company 20 years. We had a new CEO, and about an hour after the new CEO was elected, I got a text from Houston. And it was a girl that I met at a beauty salon who said that her director of marketing was in her office and screamed. And she said, what happened? She said, my brother just got elected CEO of Spencer Stuart. But I'm in London, and I met her in Houston. And it was like, of course. It was so wow. The world, my company is global, so it makes sense that I'm in different places, but, this global world in which we all live and operate shrinks all the time. And so expand your network because it'll pay off and wonderful things will happen. And then I say don't overlook informal support mechanisms. I'm on the board of the Girl Scouts. I get a lot of business from referrals from the people who've gotten to know me on the board of the Girl Scouts. And you just never know. These are informal support mechanisms or boards or activities or the soccer team or whatever, but all of that helps. The point I'm trying to make is stretch your mind, stretch yourself, get out of your comfort zone, raise your hand. It's good to do good work, but you need to do more than that. Any questions? This is about within companies. Any questions? Okay. Go ahead. So this is about, I saw the hands of the people who aspire to be on a board. So why would you want to be on a board? Because you take all the skill sets and knowledge and expertise that you've been building through your career and put it to work. And boards could be either for-profit or not-for-profit, like the Girl Scouts for me. I'm not on public boards because I want to do work for them, and I wouldn't want to have any conflicts. I have been on public boards in my private equity life because a lot of times when you write the check to invest in a company and they go public, then you're on a public board. That wasn't rocket science, was it? Go ahead. So what are some features of board service? Well, everybody thinks it's so hip and cool, but it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time, so you have to anticipate how much time you're willing to give to board service. And, this is talking about how many board meetings, then you have different committees like the audit committee, the compensation committee, the nominating and governance committee. If you're on all those committees, it takes more time. But it's not a light decision to serve on a board, even a not-for-profit board. You can go ahead. So, how do you get on a board? Well, you need to get on certain radar screens, and how do you do it? Well, the first thing is, you definitely need to meet the right people. You need to be recognized by your peer group as somebody that's very good at what they do. And And that's because you excel at what you do. Be very good at what you do, and people will want you on their board. There's a lot of different kind of expertise on boards, and let's just say you're a financial expert. If you're a financial expert, you want to be very good because you can bring that skill set to the board upon which you serve. Go ahead. If you really want to serve on a board, you need a strategy. I call it like you need your own campaign. So let your CEO know that you're interested in serving on a board. Talk to the board of your own company and let them know that you're interested in serving on a board. Talk to people who are on other boards, and talk to people like headhunters like me who understand the process. I was talking to a woman yesterday who was the CEO of a company on the West Coast. She wants to come back to Houston, and I shared this with her, and I told her she needed to run her own campaign. And the next thing I said, I'm looking at your bio. It doesn't tell me what you would bring to the party. It's not a very good bio at all because you sell yourself short. A board bio needs to have certain things in it, which we'll get to in a minute. But if you're going to serve on a board, you need to know about corporate governance and how the rhythm of the boardroom works. And wanting to serve on a board is a great and noble ambition. It takes a little time. You know, it sort of evolves, so be patient and realistic. So how do boards go and choose their board members? Well, what they do is they look at the gap. Here's what we need, and here's what we don't have. They look at the gaps of what they need. Then they identify executives and review target profiles of potential candidates. They meet them, you know, the exploratory contact, and then they introduce the top candidates to the search committee, and they do a real extensive background check. That reminds me, background check. We do background checks on placements that we make, and we look at social media. So be careful about social media. I'm sure you've been forewarned about social media, but this happened, 2 cases that happened lately. We had a CEO for a public company that we were introducing, and this CEO was a male. He liked partial nudity on Facebook, and it came out in the background check, and we had to talk to the board. Do you still want this candidate? He just liked it. You know, liking it is like clicking. You know, that was interesting. And then there was a woman up for a board in Europe with Stuart, and there was a picture of her holding a baby with an alcoholic beverage in the background. You know, that's kind of scary. You know, if you're at a party, they snap a picture, there you are. You know, so social media, be careful about being photographed in bars and things like that, because it may prove to be a problem later. Now, I had no idea it gotten to that. That's pretty selective, but it's good to think about. So a lot of people opt out of some of those Facebook and other social media. I'm on Facebook. I don't have children, but I have 23 nieces and nephews, and they put me on things, and I just let them because I'm careful about it. But I can also keep up with what they're doing, especially that Instagram. I know a lot of things the parents don't know. But you got to be careful about all of that stuff with respect to social media and background checks, because they're getting, with the internet, you can find out anything about everybody, you know, so don't have any ammo out there, okay? And then with respect to the board, then they, you know, it's in the proxy that, you know, then you get elected. So what this funnel is talking about is you start with a big pool of candidates, 20 to 30, narrow it down to 5 to 10, 2 to 3, and then there's one placement. It's a process and a funnel. So I don't want to overwhelm you about it because it's a complicated process, but it's very rewarding. But I also think that not-for-profit boards are a good way to get familiar with corporate governance, and they're very satisfactory. One of the boards that I've served on is First Tee, which gives children life skills through golf. What does golf teach you? Etiquette, courtesy, grooming. It teaches you good basic skills. And yes, I'm on the Girl Scout board because I just love to encourage people and inspire people to raise their hand and push themselves. And you know, I don't mean to be biased, but I think if you have a little girl and a little boy, when they come out of the birth canal, the little boy will say, "Give me wings and I can fly." And a little girl will say, "Well, I'm not sure I can fly, but let me do some homework." And little boys are just fearless, and little girls, they're not. And then they get worse through socializing through life, because people say, "Oh, you can't do that, you're a girl." Yes, they can. So I'm a big supporter of encouraging people to do things. Okay. So this is about the board bio. And so, you know, when you're up for a board, you need to show, you know, what roles you've had and what kind of responsibilities. You need to show the metrics of what you've accomplished. For a board bio, you need a picture. Why? You need a picture because the picture answers the questions that they don't want to ask you. You know, can't tell, are you male or female by your name? Or I can't tell, maybe we've met before, but a picture answers a lot of questions. And you just need to show more that they can learn from. One thing I said earlier was, people like to do business with those with whom they have something in common. And so, let's say you were a Girl Scout. You know, you don't have to put it on your resume, but let's say, but you could if you wanted to, or you're a soccer player, or you're active in things. That might be some common denominator that people that hire you for something or put you on a board because you had a common denominator with them. As I said, my background used to say marathon runner. I don't know if it does or not anymore, but a lot of people wanted to meet me because they thought, well, I'm a marathon runner. So they wanted to meet me because of that. Or I get calls now because I meant to apologize about my accent. I have a very southern accent. I apologize now and later. And I've been here 36 years, but it doesn't go away. But I'm from Mississippi. And I put all those syllables in that word. My partner in private equity was Lloyd Benson. And he went to Princeton undergrad, Stanford MBA. And he'd say, "This is Mary Bash. She's from Mississippi." Well, Lloyd, I could be wrong. But I think there's a few more syllables in that word. And he just cut it off. He also used to say, "Inundated." You know, he was inundated. And I went, "Oh, I could be wrong. I think that's inundated." It's like that word, irregardless. That's not a word. And if you get slapped on the hand enough, you figure that out. But even though I'm from Mississippi, I learned one or two things. Okay. Many people don't think that, though, especially if you're from Texas. If you're from Texas, you know, you think life started here and, you know, life began here, it's still here, it's the only place. I was so shocked when I moved here. Native Texan, and I thought, really? Native Texan? But I thought Texas was backwards for two reasons. One, they didn't have branch banking when I got here in 1983. They would have all the banks with the same name, but you couldn't go to any of them with the same name. They all operated independently. That's better. And what I thought was so brilliant in Mississippi was we had our Social Security number was your driver's license number. Today, that would just be the kiss of death. But I was so efficient because if you asked me my social, I knew it because it was my driver's license number. But, you know, now for privacy, that would be stupid. But, you know, all you know is what you know, and that's all I knew at the time. So my final thoughts are, if you want to have board service, position yourself well, have a board-ready CD with your picture on it, leverage your contacts, let them know that you want to do it, do your homework. The first board you get is the hardest one to get, and then you're hot. Now, I have a girlfriend who y'all may know, her name is Martha Carnes. She was at PwC, you know, the accounting firm, and she recently retired. We were both on a panel together. And I was out there talking about board service, and I said, well, the first one is the hardest to get. And once you get aboard, then you're not. So Martha was after me, and she sat up there and she said, well, I'm Martha Carnes, and apparently I'm hot. Mary said I was, because I have my first board. Now, I love Martha to death, but she's really not what I'd call hot. She's kind of like a Girl Scout. You know, sweet and all that stuff, and so it's too funny for Martha to say, my name is Martha Carnes and I'm hot, because Mary said I was. Anyway, so with respect to that first board, yes, market yourself, be careful about conflicts. Non-profits as a proxy just means going on a not-for-profit board is a good thing to do because you learn about corporate governance. But be realistic about your expectations. Stay open-minded. Stay engaged and current on things that keep the faith. People ask me when I'm going to retire. And I'm going to work as long as I'm relevant. Now, what does it take to be relevant? For me, I need to be open to change because change is inevitable. And I need to have friends in every age. Every generation I need to have friends, and I do. And I'll give you a story real quick that shows why that's helpful. But different generations get their information differently. Some people want to touch the paper, some people don't. They want to read the paper online. But what I like to see is what influences you. How do you let yourself get influenced? Who reaches you? And why does this matter? I did some board work for a REIT, a real estate investment trust, a few years ago, and they have apartments nationwide. And when I looked at the board, it was these middle-aged Caucasian men. And what do they know about the young generations to whom they're renting apartments? Nothing. So I said, you need some diversity of thought on your board. I don't want to say you needed, because people get scared when I say diversity. So you need diversity of thought. That can be a lot of things. You just need people that think differently than you, especially representing, you know, young people. So on that board, and I called them disruptors, and it ended up being 2 women in that case, but one was Renu Couture, who was the chancellor at U of H. Why? Because the students at U of H are all different genders and ages, and you have to pivot, you know, and understand and be able to reach and connect. That's kind of like renting apartments, isn't it? You know, it's all different. And then the other, I called a friend of mine in Austin, and I said, when you think of disruptors, who do you think of? And there was this woman named Heather Bruner, and she was entrepreneur of the year and things like that. And I put her on that board. It ended up, that's who it was. But, you know, I don't think disruptor, I think disruptor is a good word, because sometimes things are just too steady state. And you need to challenge how they think. Every company in every industry is going to be disrupted. If you don't stay relevant as a company, you're not going to make it. Spencer Stuart is proud of itself because it's 62 years old. But there are a lot of companies that aren't going to make it because they didn't stay relevant. And the examples people use are like Xerox or companies like that. If you don't stay relevant as a person or as a company, you won't meet the test of time. And so I think it's important. And the other example I was going to give you was, so they asked me one time if I wanted to meet the CEO of the Girl Scouts. And I said, yeah. So I went to lunch with her. And I said, you know what? I was a Girl Scout. Well, they knew that. They had read my bio where I had said something about, well, I learned business by selling cookies. I ran a little cookie business. We all did if you were a Girl Scout. So they invited me to a lunch, a fundraising lunch, surprise, surprise. So on the way over, I saw the Boy Scout building, this $100 million building. And I thought, wow, that's a lot of money. So and they're raising $12 million, and they had 3.65 left that they need to raise. So I thought to myself, I need to help them. Because their board members were all volunteers. They weren't people who I call players or doers, people that make it happen. And so I thought, I need to help them, so I'm going to. So I sent out emails to girlfriends of mine. And I said to them, like 20 girls. And I said, all ages, remember my friends are all different ages. I said, you probably didn't know it, but I was a Girl Scout. But I don't have children, so you wouldn't know that. But I was a Girl Scout, and I want to help them, want to raise this money. $3.65 million, I want to help them raise that. So I said, come over to my condo on Thursday at 6 o'clock. And so we had fajitas and okay, we had white wine, and okay, we might have had Thin Mints. It goes really well with white wine. Anyway, so we did that, and then what we did was we got a list of all the organizations that gave to the Boy Scouts. $100 million building, remember? All the organizations engaged in the Boy Scouts, and we divided up the list. And then, let's say I took Weatherford. So I would call the CEO of Weatherford and say, Mr. Durant Danner, thank you so much for being supportive in all ages, because you're going to relate to them differently and they're going to enhance your life. I have a girlfriend who is 110 now. And she doesn't know me like she did, but as recently as 2 years ago, we went out once a month and had, I would call it the girls going out. I changed her life, she changed my life. When she was 99, she stopped me in the high-rise where I live and said, Mary, I have a crush on you. And I went, okay. And she said, I want to take you and your husband to dinner. And I said, okay. So she took us to dinner at the country club, at the Houston Country Club, where she joined as a tennis member. And I thought, well, what would impress her? Let me take her to the Coronado Club. Well, she knew everybody there because her husband was one of the founding members. But it was so enriching to hear her talk about, she remembers things that we've heard about growing up, because she grew up in New York, even though she was born in Texas. And then I've got these twins that are 10 years old that are the smartest ones in their room. They're number 1 and 2 in their class that I met. And I have everything in between, friends. But it enriches my life, and it'll enrich your life. Don't have many me's for your friends, people that look like you and just like you. It's good to have diversity in your friends and in your relations, because you just never know, and it can change your life. So, to wrap this up, go ahead. You need a plan? Go ahead. It matters how you look. Yes. Fitness. I'm a big athlete. I mean, I'm not a big athlete. In my head, I'm a big athlete. But I pump iron. I do a lot of yoga. I don't run anymore. But I stay fit because I think you need to be clear in your head, and and I walk 5 miles every day with my husband. I really do let him talk. But I think you need to be physically fit and mentally fit. And I think whatever you'd like to do to work out, this is funny. So I see people today that I met maybe 30 years ago, and they said that when I met them, I said, well, come meet me and we'll take a walk. Well, 30 years ago, I walked in high heels, in the tunnel, in the air conditioning. And I have girls today complaining that I was killing them, but they didn't tell me. Now we're mostly flat, but actually today these are wedges. So because what happens is you get more senior is high heels start hurting your hips. But I think fitness is a mindset, and I mean literally fit. Stay fit, whatever that takes for you, do it. And it's a good way to spend time with people. Take a walk. And if it's too hot outside, go to the Galleria, go to a mall, walk in the air conditioning, go to your fitness center, walk in the gym. And then network. I'm asked a lot of times, Mary, if you think it's important to network. I think it's critical to network. Networking has gotten me business, it's gotten me tickets to games, it's gotten me so many things. And I never worry about, when somebody asks me to do something for them, if I can, I do. I never worry about them reciprocating, but they always do. And it usually exceeds my expectations. And that's my philosophy about work, too. If somebody asks you to do something for them at work, do it. If it doesn't hurt you, if it's not illegal or anything, do it, because it always pays off beyond what you thought it might do. And just, that's what makes the world go round. I think that's my take off. So I love this. So once you've had all the other, I love this picture. You're prepared, you're fit, you're ready. Take off for the rest of your career. Any questions? Yes.
So I agree with a lot of your points about get out of your comfort zone, take on jobs, do other things, all the things you listed. Mm-hmm. Excellent points. I think that a lot of people in here, I hope you listen to them, especially the younger folks.
Yeah.
So I guess the question I have is more of, like today, there's only about 2% of Asians on corporate boards. And so what is your track record of getting Asians on boards? I mean, do you go out and do a little more? Because the recruitment recruiters are the ones that are setting the pace for the boards. I mean, because a lot of times you take even an Asian who retires in a CIO position or even a top level VP position, a senior VP position, they don't have that exposure, and maybe they haven't listened to you. So how do we change that number? Because we're fast approaching probably 6.5% Asian across the country. The last census was, I think, 6%. It's probably going to go beyond 6.5. And so how do we change that situation so that the boards reflect more of the community of America? And then within that, what's your responsibility to try to make that change?
Well, every board search that we do, they always want diversity. And I don't ever look specifically this percent Asian, this percent this, or this, I just try to give diversity of thought, like I said. I had breakfast this morning with a CHRO who grew up in China. She was born in China, came here when she was 5. And I told her what I was doing. She knows this organization. She said she and I would be a hell of a team to present together because she could give me the perspective about the culture and the discipline and some of the words I've used today because she taught me this morning and opened my eyes to things. But part of it is, when I do a search, we're looking for people who have certain functional expertise. Let me give you an example. So I'm doing a search for a building products company right now for a board member. They want diversity. I don't care what kind of diversity it's going to end up being, but I'm looking for people in distribution and in other functions that have this functional expertise. And I'm indifferent. I don't seek out. So it's kind of like a catch-22. It's like if during your career you rise up because you networked, you communicated, you let other people know you, then you rise up. That so that you rise up within the organization. What I don't think we want to do is quotas. I don't think we want to say, well, we have to have 6% Asian people on this board. We want them to get it because they had the skill sets. See what I mean? And so, how do we catch up? I think that's your question, is how do we catch up? Well, I think that's a great question, and I think I need to think about that. Because I hadn't really put myself in your shoes,
What's the question again? I'm so sorry, I came in a little bit late. What was the question?
The question is, we're at 2% Asians on boards today, in the public boards across the United States.
You're talking about S&P 500 kind of a situation?
Any public company, so it may not be S&P 500.
All right.
But the point is that how do we get more Asians?
How do you define Asian? How do you define an Asian?
Typically, for the world I live in, it would be an Asian in America.
Okay. You're talking about East Asian, South Asian, Central Asian?
All Asians.
All Asians, right? I think the number is way more than 2%. The number is way more than 2%.
It might be 2.1.
If you look at Microsoft, if you look at Google, if you look at any of the tech companies, if you look at where they are, that surprisingly is not 2%, right? I mean, you're talking
That's
about
tech companies. That's industry.
Industry, right? If you look at food and distribution, if you look at food services, if you look at
Pepsi. In the workforce or on the board?
On the board, right? Where I see is I see so many Asian faces everywhere I go.
Good.
Every time I attend any more of these investor meetings, a lot of Asian
But are they sitting on these corporate boards? Or
Yes.
they just, I find that,
I think
that very fascinating because when you talk even Fortune 50, you can barely name a handful of APIs that are serving on these corporate boards. So I find it very fascinating. So I'm just curious, like, where are these folks that you specifically, are they tech sector people, or where are they?
You know, when I look around, right, when you look at Target, you look at Walmart, you look at all these other places, I've seen Asian faces there.
There's not one at Target.
Sorry?
Zero, Target.
Not Target?
No.
Walmart.
That's what I'm saying, like, are you talking about senior executives versus on boards?
Yes.
The
So,
actual board of directors.
Actual.
let me interject. So I just looked this up, and Leadership Education for Asian Pacifics, they did a study in 2012, and the report is called Asian and Pacific Islander Executive Officers and Top Earners in the Fortune 500.
Yeah.
And it does say in this study in 2012, 2% of executive officers in Fortune 500 companies are.
That was only because of rounding. It was actually 1/9 something.
Really?
It is 2%. As of 2012. And I don't think things have changed too much since then.
I mean, you may see Asian faces at these venues that you venture to,
Yes.
but they're probably not on the board. They may be at the C-suite level, maybe below the C-suite level, but I don't think they're on the board.
Well, but they could be, and if they follow these things I'm talking about, which are ethnic neutral, you know, it's just be good at what you do, be known to other people, rise up in the company, get out of your comfort zone. That's all genders, all ethnic groups, etc. But okay,
Just a follow-up to that.
yeah.
So typically, boards are chosen from people who have served on the C-suites. Okay, typically.
But there are some exceptions.
Yes, there are.
But
So
you're right.
your word is exactly right. It's the exception.
Yeah.
So typically, they're from the C-suites, and typically, Asians don't make it to the C-suite. And if that's the feeder pool.
Why is that? Why do you think that is?
Unconscious bias. It could be that
Could
they're
it be
not.
culture? Could it be
Culture.
Could it be
But get-
because they are not doing some of the things to communicate and stretch themselves and be out there? Not that they couldn't, but culturally, maybe they weren't encouraged to do that. I'm just asking.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you, that's all part of it, and some of the points you make are great points of how to get there. But I think that there's a piece, and I guess the point I'm trying to make is that you have a firm, there's firms like yours across the country, and I guess
Yeah.
my question is, it's just a question, it's not a criticism, it's just something for you to think about.
Yeah.
Is how do we try to get more from, and I'm asking you to think about it so that you can say,
Yeah.
wow, did I ask this question? I wonder what I could do so that way maybe.
All right,
in the
you're throwing
point-
down the gauntlet, aren't you?
It's potentially,
I need one. I like that.
it's
I do
potentially
like-
new business.
Yeah, there you go.
Potentially
There
going
you
back
go.
to what you said.
There you go. No, one time they asked me when I was 40, they said, would I write an article on what it's like to be a female in business? And I thought, well, I never thought about being a female in business. You gotta think about it. We do now, I do now, because the numbers shrunk as I stayed out there longer, but, so you brought it to my attention. It's a very good question. I'm on it. Yes?
I kind of want to follow up on what Ken is saying and ask, for people who put together these boards, do they think about, maybe it's my responsibility to find people who provide me that perspective? Because you mentioned about you don't want to fill quotas. You don't have to fill quotas, but it'd be nice to have those people for the sake of having a different
I'm
perspective
talking
on that
about like
board.
California, you know, they're trying to force it, you know, all the companies have to
Yeah.
have X%
Well,
women.
yeah.
I hate it because it's gonna dilute the really good women who are on there because they deserve it, and they're gonna do it to check a box. You know what I mean?
But wouldn't it also be beneficial to force yourself to have someone to have that perspective that another person isn't going to provide?
Yeah, but I hate that word force. I'd rather they appreciate it. Why? Because it changes the dynamics of what's going on. I like to think about when you have diversity of thought on the board, which could be gender or ethnic or whatever, it's more representative of your shareholders, the partners the company has, the end users. It's more representative, and they're going to make better decisions. The data says that they do make better decisions because they're starting to track it. So I think it's very beneficial, and that's why, that's the role we, Spencer Stuart, play, we and our other executive search firms like Spencer Stuart. We actually started the board practice. It got started, we started it, and others are doing it. But when we work with a board, it's almost like holding up a mirror to the board. I had a guy, actually she was the CHRO of a public company, and this one was in Pittsburgh, and she said, would you come up and talk to me, I'm the chairman. And this was about a $3 billion company, so it's, reasonably sized. And about our board, so I went up there and I said, well, what would you like me to tell you? They said, well, what do you see? Well, I see a board of middle-aged Caucasian men who all live in Pittsburgh. It was that bad. It was just so, exclusive, just myopic, really. So the chairman said, well, Mary, what do we need? And I said, well, you need some diversity of thought. People that challenge how you think, that aren't redundant, because all you guys probably go to the same clubs. Same club, same church, same everything. You don't represent your shareholders, you don't represent your end markets. You need some diversity of thought. And they have, and on the slate, I had an Asian on that slate. I'm not through yet, they haven't made their decision yet, but I didn't seek out an Asian, I was just seeking out skill sets. Skill sets. But I'll pay closer attention.
The skill sets are one component of the overall profile.
Correct.
So skill sets for sure, because you need to put someone on the board that provides that relevancy to them. But
Yeah.
I think, there's other components to
Right.
the whole. So
Yeah.
on one hand, you have the skill sets, but on the other hand, the world that we live in today, we have the kind of landscape that we live in, that I think it should come hopefully you think it would come naturally to say, you know what? Our board don't reflect our customer base. I came from a Fortune 10 corporation, and I will tell you that because there's been such a big a push on the political side, all right? There's the political pressure that you will probably see other ethnic groups, but the Asians are not there. But yet, when you look at their customer base, is there.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that, like your firm, I think you guys would stand out when you take that proactive approach and let me be the agency or the firm to make this change, and see what comes from it. Because there are really very excellent Asian Americans who can fit the bill perfectly.
Well, we can't force
You can't
the
force.
client, but we can make sure the slate.
Yeah. You can make it known to them.
Yeah.
Because they may not be thinking, it's not because it just didn't come
Yeah.
to them, but,
Right.
for a firm like yours,
Right.
reputable with
Yeah.
outstanding
Well, here's
record.
something that you may or may not realize. When you do a search for an executive position, you have a position specification. Think of it as a job description. Here's what we're looking for. When we do board searches now, same thing. We have a position specification. We want somebody that maybe they're very familiar with digital, they're global, they've been in a multi-site business, I'm making this up, but we have specific criteria. So when we develop a slate of candidates that match that spec, they have to be qualified. They have to have the components of the spec, so they have to have that. So it's a little balancing act, but I think it's a very good question. I got the message.
We want you to be the first to go into this new territory and be very successful at it.
On my 5-mile walk with my husband tonight, we walked to Memorial Park and back. When I announce that to him, he'll go, "Here we go again." Yes.
So, you mentioned that networking is a critical component of rising to these board positions.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, in our current business, a lot of networking takes place in like golf meetings, over drinks, that sort of idea where it's off, almost off the table, out of the business room. As someone who's not 21, not interested in golf, and frankly not interested in smoking either, what are things and you bring them to my space. So
Well, what about picking up trash on Galveston? I'm just making that up, but other things the company's doing for kind of, community projects the company's involved in, or if the company's not involved in, find something you think they would benefit from. See what I mean?
So,
Be the initiator, bring it to them. Bring it to somebody that, you know, within the company that could do that, things like that. I agree, it doesn't always have to involve alcohol and all that, or even sports, but companies try to do things. I love community-minded companies, and if yours is not, maybe you can help them get there. And you probably need a partner within the company in an influential role to say, what do you think about this? And they might go, wow, I'm impressed that you came up with an idea, because you probably hadn't raised your hand about it very much yet. You look very young to me. I don't know what your age is, but you look very young. But that would be good, because look at the reputation that you're building. She cares about this company. She wants us to be more community-minded. And she's being appropriately assertive. And which is, and the whatever the activity, if it's some kind of community thing, who would say no? How could you say no? You know?
If I can answer her a little bit.
Yeah, please do.
So, you know, a little pitch for OCA. So I recommended a young man who was first coming up, and he wanted, in the worst way, to go to a .com. So this is the first bubble, okay? And he would have lost his job, the whole thing. And I said to him, I said, stay with the company, and, you know, maybe get on the OCA board. And he ended up becoming the president of the chapter in Georgia.
Oh, cool.
And being that president, he learned how to motivate differently than your typical corporate structure. And by doing that, he became president. He learned how to motivate through influencing people, motivate them to do things that typically, if you were a boss of a group, you would say, I want this done, and your lieutenants would go, yes, sir, I'll get that done for you. But in a nonprofit board, if you said that, your nonprofit board would get up and walk out on you. And you would have to learn how to motivate. I feel that today, he's a vice president of marketing there. And how did he get there? Because he learned through the boards how to motivate people to get things done. So it's a big plug for not just OCA, but any nonprofit. You develop leadership skills, and you become a leader within your area, and hopefully with that, your corporation will say, boy, wow, we have maybe somebody on the ERG who's also a president of a local, you know, Asian organization. Maybe we should take a look at her instead of this other white guy for that position, because she has the leadership skills to motivate people to do things. So that's just a plug for OCA.
That's a great example. That's a great example. Sorry, you have your hand up?
Comment. I completely agree with what you said. Like, you know, I guess I'm a living example here. Actually, I moved from Michigan to Austin, and to this point, actually, I started off a chapter in Austin for my company, GM Asian Connections, and that's how I was known. In fact, like that's how I got connected to Shay, who's sitting right next to me, and that's how the diversity office reached out to me. Hey, there's an OCA event there, and you live in Austin. Can you make it over there? That's how they picked me, actually. You know, so that's one definitely in a route for you to really get yourself, you know, more visibility. And yeah, there's a lot of opportunities.
When we look around the room, or when I look around the room, we also have to be realistic. You know, if you're talking to going on corporate boards, I don't think, you know, even myself, as established as I think I am, but I think we also have to be realistic to the capacity that we have too. Ken hit it, you know, like, you know, on target there. There are other means or other ways of attaining these skill sets. And volunteerism is one big way. Putting yourself in the community, something that you may not be comfortable with also, is going to expose you to other things that will give you the comfort doing things differently and thinking differently. Because oftentimes when we're so used to doing things a certain way, you begin to live in a silo and you continue to go that direction. But when you put yourself out there and experience other things, meet other people, Mary mentioned about networking. That's gold. Networking is gold. The network that you make and create does not stay with your employer. It goes with you wherever you go. And it's how you use your network to your advantage to advance what it is that you want to do. So, for the people, young people, especially the young people in the room, I encourage you to get involved, whether it's OCA or other, community organizations.
Or if you see a need, like Memorial Park, pick up the litter at Memorial Park. Why don't we create a group that would do that, because we all use it every day. I'm making that up. But just things like that, things that are needed in Houston that no one's addressing, and pitch it to your company and say, buy some t-shirts so we can wear the t-shirts so we can. Well, what did I major in?
Yeah.
Well, at first, I didn't have any counseling. I had 6 siblings. And my little daddy was chauvinistic, bless his little heart. And so, and I know you're all going to be jealous, but my father offered me to go to any Mississippi school, any of them. And I was stupid. I didn't know that was not a big deal. I mean, it was like, really? But the assumption in my family was that we would all go to college. And which one in Mississippi would you go to, Mary? Because you're a girl. The boys are going to go to Notre Dame. See, there was my little dad being a little chauvinistic. But anyway, so I went to college and I signed up for secretarial science because I was a girl and I thought that's what I should do. And I could type. To see me at the break, and he said, Mary, I don't think you're challenged. You don't? No, and I think you should change your major to what? Business? Okay. So I changed my major to business. I love business. I'm very good at business. But I don't have Ivy League. I have Mississippi State undergrad, and then when I was graduating, I interviewed to see if it made sense for me to get an MBA. But I'm old school where you went straight through. Now they want you to work. But my dad had 5 of us in college at one time. So I needed an assistantship, and I got some scholarships, and I went straight through. But I had a 4 in graduate school because how do you quit studying between a B and an A? I couldn't find that. I just studied as hard as I could because I would lose the assistantship if I fell below a B. And I ended up getting straight A's. I am not smart. I have hustle. And I'm a marathon runner, and I'm a middle child, and I just go. And so that scares people sometimes, which I think is so funny, because they'll say, Mary, you're intimidating. Me? I'm just a middle child, and I'm a survivor. I'm going to survive. And some of my colleagues in Houston asked me, the guys, how did you ever make partner in a firm, a global firm, where we have all these Ivy Leagues? Well, you know what I tell them? It's my husband and I who we were rednecks from Mississippi. We walked, and on these little walks, he's not a corporate citizen, but he helped me pick my battles. Some battles aren't worth it. You let them go. But if it's worth it, you have to hold your ground. And then it has to be with substance. And so you have to fight for yourself. That's what I was talking about. And you have to look out for yourself. And I remember this one guy one time, he was doing stuff that I thought wasn't really unethical. It was just mean stuff. Like, I was his analyst, and we were financing stuff. This was when I was at a bank. And then we would get ready to close the deal, and he'd say, we're not closing. Why? I don't want to. It's a power game. And I thought, here I am, 25 years old. That's going to be my reputation. She didn't close the deals because she didn't want to, really? And so I told him, I said, excuse me, but you're ruthless. And he said, what'd you say? And I said, you're ruthless. You're making us look bad. And he said, I can't believe you said that. And I said, and I'm leaving because I had gotten another job offer. And he was trying to get me to stay, and that's why I had to be honest with him and say, I don't want your reputation to be mine. Because when you're young, that's all you have is your reputation. If you compromise it, if you do anything unethical, or you do mean stuff, that's who you're going to become. And that's not who you want to be, and that's just not going to get you anywhere. So you have to kind of have your principles and keep your integrity and do the right thing and be consistent. And sometimes that's not easy, but you just have to hold your ground. So, business, yes.
When you look at behaviors or characteristics and when looking for a board, is there a particular gap that you observe, whether it's for minority executives maybe coming in? Is there some particular gap that you see?
Yeah, and the gap would be not being self-aware. For instance, there's this particular board member who is very experienced in the space they're in. But when they went on their first public board, and they've been in that boardroom a lot, you know, making presentations, every topic that comes up in the boardroom, this individual opines on it. Nobody asked his opinion, but he wants to opine on it, to where it became embarrassing because they would snicker, like, here goes George again, he's gonna opine on that, and it was like predictable, like right on cue, there goes George. And that's not being very self-aware. What you need to do, and this was, I'm proof positive, I actually am still having a hard time, y'all won't be surprised by this, but it is so hard to listen. But you need to learn to listen and speak when you have something additive to say, but not speak just to speak. And what I wish that I had when I was 20, that I'm working hard on today, is to become more self-aware and to know that not everybody gets me. I turn some people off. That's okay. I need to be okay with that because not everybody's going to like you. And that used to really kill me. But not everybody's going to like you. Not everybody's going to think the way I do. And you have to give people room to be who they are. I just want people to think of me as being authentic, consistent, objective, and energetic, and fit. And then everything's good. But, you know, you need to be self-aware and know that by opining on everything, or whatever your little thing you might do, it doesn't always go over very well. And I think the key to that is really fine-tuning the skill of listening and paying attention. Anything else? Yes, ma'am.
So on your list of board members, I've kind of tried to investigate some of that, and you didn't mention any of the financial commitments that have to come in place to be on the board.
With the board? Well, like on a not-for-profit, they have financial commitments, but a for-profit board, they pay you. And that's why people want to take, oh, no, they pay you. It could be very lucrative. Different boards pay differently. But let's go back to where you were. Certain nonprofit organizations should reveal up front when they're asking you if you'd consider it, what the financial commitment is. One not-for-profit board that I'm doing some board work for now, they have 8 meetings a year at 7 o'clock in the morning. And the financial commitment is, to the extent that you can, you know, please be generous with us to the extent that you can. I like that. Because, like in my case, people think I have this great job and my husband and I don't have children. But we have 23 nieces and nephews, but most importantly for me, my charity really begins at home because my brother has 5 children and his wife died 8 years ago and they're all teenagers and I want them all to go to college and he doesn't have the money. And so I'm going to try to help 5 children go to college and 5 children that I make sure they have a vacation every summer because I think that's important to build those memories. And so last week I rented a house in Galveston for these children and their dad and on the beach. Because they need to see the joy from what they're getting. So therefore, I don't have the disposable income to give a lot, you know. So I like it when they say to the extent that you can, you know, because everybody has a different situation. And but on a for-profit board, you know, a public board, they pay you. And retainers vary from, you know, probably $40,000 a year to $200,000 a year. That's why people want public boards. And sometimes they want them because they think it's cool. Sometimes, you know, and then, but I don't think you do it for the money. I think you do it because you can add value and you have something to bring and you want to develop relationships with the other board members. Those are the right reasons. It's not the money. But I did a board search recently for, it's a company in Johannesburg. It's a pulp and paper company headquartered in Johannesburg. And they wanted an American financial expert. And some of my candidates looked at the comp and said, that's not worth it for me to go to Johannesburg 4 times a year. Now that's legit. Because if it's not, you know, your time is, you know, you should get reimbursed for your time. And the opportunity cost, you could serve on another board that would pay you fairly. I mean, there's a fair fee. So yeah, that's why a lot of people do it, is for the money.
Because I have noticed there's a lot of men that are on lots of boards.
Well, there used to be a club.
Yeah, they all seem to be.
They put each other on each other's boards. Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
it's like,
And now it's changing. It's changing, and because they've collected the data to show that a diverse board is a better board, they make better decisions, it's more representative, and there are these organizations that police who's on the boards just to make sure that they're representative, and they get penalized by not having any diversity.
because it does seem like women maybe have less income usually than men, or don't have.
It's getting better.
It is getting right there, but the fact that they also usually take that and invest it into their children or their families in a different way than men may. So, you know, to have that kind of, if you're gonna devote a certain amount of time, you give your time to these things. And
But there's no gender bias for board comp. That's good. There's no gender bias. It's all the same. Board retainers, you get so much. All of them is the same. And then, but if you're on more committees, you get more money by serving on more committees because you're spending more time. See, so that's, but it's pretty gender neutral on that. Yes.
I'm sorry, just comment on that with the S&P 500. There was a study done by the S&P 500 that said the boards that had more diversity, their stock actually performed better than boards that had zero diversity.
Yeah. I like it. Okay, I have 5 more minutes. Anything else? There are no dumb questions. So ask me anything that you want to know.
Do you do any work overseas? You said it's something in South Africa.
What
Do you do any work overseas?
Yeah,
And it's because you spoke about South Africa.
right.
Anything in Asia?
Yes, yeah, we're global. We have 50 offices in 26 countries.
Do they look for someone of their own ethnicity in Korea, Japan, Asia, this, that, the other? Or are they looking for some white guy to go to Asia? This is an
It
honest question.
varies, because maybe the diversity they need is white. Who knows? You know, it varies all over the world. It varies. And I think, I'm just glad to be out there right now. It's exciting. And change is faster than it's ever been. And if we're not ready for that, you know, need to be ready. Yes? Yes.
You said that we can ask anything.
Yeah, you can.
Okay, I registered for California International Marathon. I never running the long distance before. What's your suggestion for that?
Oh, you mean you're gonna run a marathon if you've never done it?
Yes. What is your suggestion for the training plans?
Okay. Well, you don't have to run 26 to run 26. You don't have to have run 26. I think it's like you have to have run like maybe 15. The rest can be adrenaline the day of the race. Make sure you're in good shape and make sure your shirt has your name on it the day of the race. So they'll say, "Go, Mary," because when you're starting to hit the wall and slump, when they call your name, you're gonna perk right back up.
But they said if you over 6 hours, something like that, it doesn't count. Is this true?
Oh, I think it does. If you had the stamina to do it. My dad asked me, he said, "Mary, why do you want to run a marathon?" And I said, "Daddy, because you can't buy it, you can't marry it, you earn it." And I have so much respect for Oprah because she has all the money in the world. And she put herself through the agony running a marathon, and I don't care what her time was. In my case, I won 3rd place in the state, which I was thrilled about, but I don't think, you don't have to place. If you do it and you finish it, the last race I ran, I got injured before the race started, but I was inspired by my mentor who died a week before the race. He was the guy that accepted me as a runner when I was a little baby jogger. And he was at MD Anderson, a bubble boy with leukemia, dying. And I was raising money for the Leukemia Society, inspired by him. And I got hurt because I got on the Stairmaster on the maximum setting for as long as I could, because I may overdo things sometimes. Anyway, so I went to the doctor and I said, "Doctor, will I do long-term damage?" He said, "No." And he said, "It's going to hurt." And I said, "Okay." So I limped to the starting line, started running, took 10 miles for my legs to kind of go numb. But I made myself a deal, which is if you finish this race and earn this purse, because I was raising money, if you do that, you can retire from running, you don't have to run another one. And I did it, and I honored my deal to me, and I quit running races then. And, but I don't think, if you do it 6 hours, you did it. See, in your head, you did it, you ran a marathon, you don't have to tell people your time. So I think it's accomplishing the goal. So, yes, last question.
Oh, yeah, thanks for hosting this session this time. And I'm very inspired by what you said and all other discussions that we had. My question is, you're talking about networking. I know that it is a skill set, and my experience is for some people it's much easier, and for some people actually for me as an example, it took me like a long while to get there. It needs to feel comfortable to meet strangers. For me, it's like I start with like 1 hour social hour and said that, okay, I'm just going to be there, meet 3 people, and then I go home. Like I start with that, like starting small, and then eventually, yeah, I got to at least, I don't mind going to networking events. My question is, that's what you're talking about, like going to these volunteer events, and it's actually extra hours besides the day job. So my belief that is really something that the person needs to be very passionate about with a particular issue. And another question is how, from your experience and your observation of others, how would they be able to balance the time? Because your significant other might not be having the same interests as you do.
Yeah,
So when
yeah.
you're spending like 6 hours cleaning
Yeah.
the beach, maybe it's not something that he's passionate about, and maybe his issue is more like, okay, social justice in certain aspects. And so how would you be able to
Had to get it
balance
all
that?
done.
Yeah.
Well, I network pretty heavily at the fitness center.
Mm-hmm.
My husband hates to go with me because he said it's like going with a movie star because I know everybody by design. But guess what? They hire me, they're clients now, or they're candidates. I get to know people. So I network, I don't even think about it. It just comes naturally to me. And so, you know, doesn't have to be just the people at work. Your network needs to be broader than that. It could be at church. It could be with the parents of your, friends of your, if you have kids, their parents or whatever. It just needs to be part of what you do, and you'll broaden your, but be selective about where you are, like, don't just go to any gym. Go to the gym where there are people that you're going to want to network with, Does that help? But I like what you're saying, which is, if you just get yourself to go for like 30 minutes or something, bite-sized chunks.
Yeah, I think my question, maybe I wasn't very clear, is how would you balance the time with the significant other? Maybe when you guys have very opposite interests. Yeah, and because that's important, the network you build, I hope that, or I build, hopefully is kind of like there is some overlap with the significant other. Otherwise, it will be very hard. Like,
Yeah.
He wants my presence in his event, and I want his presence in my event, and so that's
Well,
we don't have so
compromise.
much time.
Do some of what he likes to do. Let him do some of what you like to do. I never thought I'd be playing golf, but I do. And if you say, am I a good golfer? I'm an emerging golfer. And I don't practice till I deserve my handicap. But I look cute. Okay?
Okay, thank you, Mary, thank you, spending the afternoon with us. I also want to make sure we acknowledge our sponsors, Nielsen, Shell, and UPS. yes, they made this possible for us to have Mary here and for us to learn from you. There's so much you can all do on your own, specifically your